Hey guys, tonight we journey to the misty canals of 18th century Venice, where the cobblestones echo under your boots, and every window flickers with the kind of secrets that never make it into the guidebooks. You re-following a whisper something you overheard at a dockside wine stall about a place not listed on any map. A house whose doors open only to those who carry the right combination of charm, curiosity, and coin. It's late, and Venice glows. Lanterns bobbed gently on gondolas, casting trembling reflections across the canal. You walk alone, or maybe not. Footsteps behind you seem to echo just a bit too close, a bit too often. But you don't turn around. You're not supposed to. Eventually, you reach it. A palazzo not grand enough to be famous, but too ornate to be forgotten. Its doorway is carved with grotesque half-faces with hollow eyes and curling tongues, and there's no number above the lintel. No name, just a door, and a knock you're not sure you even heard yourself make. The door creaks open with a groan, but no one is visible. Inside, the hall glimmers with candlelight caught in gold-leaf scrollwork. Everything smells faintly of rosewater, beeswax, and something darker, something like cloves or secrets. You've heard about these places, called casini in polite circles, literally little houses. But in Venice, that meant more than a home. It meant pleasure. Not just carnal, though certainly that too. These were homes for the indulgence of every sense: music, scent, food, games, power, illusion. A fantasy built over a web of silks and lies. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave me a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I love knowing who's drifting off with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step inside, and the door shuts behind you with an authority that suggests you've passed a point of no return. A hallway stretches forward, its floor tiled in a checkerboard of black and cream marble. The ceiling curves in low, like the inside of a shell, painted with cherubs whose eyes are not quite looking at you, but not quite looking away. There's no immediate host, but the house is not empty. You hear the soft murmur of voices further in, and the distant ripple of harpsichord music. The sound bends around corners, trickling down from what must be a salon upstairs. The scent changes, too, now layered with musk and orange blossom. In the 1700s, Venice was already in decline politically, but socially, it was blazing. The Republic had become a playground for aristocrats, libertines, and wealthy travelers looking to vanish from polite society for a night or 20. Pleasure houses like this one weren't brothels, not exactly. They were curated experiences, part salon, part theater, part something else entirely. Historians still argue whether the most notorious ones were connected to organized crime, noble families, or even secret societies like the Rosicrucians. What's certain is that many were protected by bribery, by tradition, and by the convenient blindness of Venetian authorities. The first room you enter feels like a vestibule, but there's a weight to the air, like you've stepped into something deliberate. A woman appears silently from behind a tapestry. She's wearing a robe of seafoam green velvet, her hair powdered, lips painted deep plum. She doesn't speak, just holds out her hand. You place the coin into it. It's not local currency, it's a medallion someone gave you, depicting a winged lion. She weighs it in her palm, nods once, then vanishes again. A second later, a different woman, no older than 20, dressed in ivory silk appears and beckons. You follow. And so begins the induction. You don't just enter a pleasure house like this. You're absorbed, dusted with fine powders. Your shoes are exchanged for embroidered slippers. You're given a scent to dab at your wrists, and neckenbergris and violet, warm and strange. You're not asked your name. One wall in the next chamber is entirely covered in Murano mirrors, rimmed with gold. You glance at yourself and notice you're not alone. Someone behind you has been watching through the reflection. When you turn, there's no one there. A mainstream historical fact. Venetian pleasure houses were tightly linked to the world of opera and music. Many of the performers here were also singers or musicians in the city's famous theaters. Some even doubled as composers, using pseudonyms to avoid scandal. Your guide gestures you through another door, and the room changes. This one is quieter, darker, a vestibule of transition. You realize the architecture is playing a trick. Curved walls, silk drapery, and indirect candlelight are designed to disorient you. You're losing your sense of direction on purpose. And here's your first light joke. You're pretty sure this place has more curtains than an IKEA on fire. A fringe tidbit. Some Venetian pleasure houses included wax effigies of famous lovers posed medembrist to serve both as and conversation starters. A little creepy, sure, but this is Venice. You approach the final set of gilded double doors. They are tall, warm to the touch, and humming faintly with the vibration of a distant violin. When they swing open, your first full glimpse of the house's interior hits like a wave of scent, color, and heat. Gilded doors, yes, but also gilded lies. You're in. The moment the gilded doors close behind you, the air thickens. It's as if the building exhales, and now you're inside its lungs. You blink, adjusting to the flickering light of dozens, no, hundreds of candles, suspended from a chandelier so immense it looks like something that should be hanging in a cathedral, not a house built for pleasure. But then again, Venice never cared much for boundaries. You're in what seems like a grand salon, all polished parquet floors and crimson velvet drapes. The walls are covered in oil paintings, some mythological, others deeply personal. You notice that the eyes in the portraits all seem to follow you, but not in the haunted, Gothic way. No, these eyes seem to be assessing you, judging, deciding whether you belong. A soft cough breaks the silence behind you. You turn to find Himtha, masked gatekeeper. He's standing still, only a few feet away. You're not sure how he got there so quietly, but there he is, tall, stiff-backed, and robed in heavy midnight blue. His mask is not the kind you see at carnival. No feathers, no frills, just a plain golden oval with small eye slits and no mouth. He doesn't speak, but raises a gloved hand. In it, a card. You take it, heart drumming faster than it should. The card simply says, "You have been seen," and then he steps aside. You're not exactly sure if it's an invitation, a threat, or both, but it works. You move deeper into the salon, where the real guests begin to emerge from behind the columns and dividers like characters stepping onto a stage. You're not the first newcomer tonight, but you might be the only one unmasked. A nearby woman glances at you. Her mask is silver, delicate, shaped like a serpent curling over one eye. She nods, not unkindly, then turns away with the kind of grace that can only be learned at court or in scandal. Venetian pleasure houses, especially in the 1700s, were deeply entwined with the culture of masks. While Carnival gave the lower classes license to mimic nobility within Cassini, masks served a more specific purpose. They erased identity, or, more accurately, they allowed for the creation of new ones. Historians still argue whether the masks were purely a social equalizer, or whether they had more sinister uses, covering up powerful faces while decisions were made in secret. Back to your golden gatekeeper. He doesn't follow you, but you feel his presence. You get the distinct sense that he's one of those people who is everywhere and nowhere at once. You drift toward the center of the room where a few guests are gathered around an ornate divan covered in peacock-colored brocade. They're laughing lightly, sipping something from fine crystal goblets. When you try to listen, the conversation shifts from Italian to French to a language that might be code. A small woman with fire-red hair approaches you. No mask. She looks young, but her eyes are not. She tilts her head and murmurs in French-accented English, "You look, ... freshly born." Before you can answer, she presses a cool glass into your hand. Don't sip, taste. If you sip, they'll know you're new. You follow her instructions. The drink is golden, thick like melted honey, and laced with something that makes your tongue tingle and your spine straighten. Aphrodisiac, you ask, half joking. Not tonight, she replies, grinning. Tonight, it's just courage. You're about to ask her name, but she disappears behind a hanging of plum-colored velvet. You're left holding the glass, wondering if you just hallucinated that entire interaction. Someone bumps your elbow, gently. You turn. It's the golden-masked gatekeeper again, standing motionless, watching you from 10 feet away. Okay. That's unsettling. A joke, maybe, to lighten the tension. You restarting to think this guy is less gatekeeper and more hall monitor from a haunted boarding school. But the room shifts again. New music begins, lute and cello. A delicate harmony drifts down from the upper floors, and you realize this salon is just the first level. There are stairs behind one of the drapes, a grand, curved staircase that leads upward, not hidden, just subtly suggested, as if only those with confidence or a death wish would dare ascend without invitation. Your mind wanders. You wonder how many of these people are nobles, how many are spies, how many are simply bored aristocrats trying to chase a thrill in a world that has already given them everything. A mainstream historical fact. In 18th century Venice, diplomatic immunity often allowed foreign ambassadors and envoys to participate in scandalous behavior without consequence. Pleasure houses became informal back rooms for political negotiations, cloaked in silk, shrouded by wine. And a fringe tidbit. Some guests brought custom masks with built-in scent dispensers or tiny flasks hidden inside the cheeks. Imagine your perfume literally attached to your persona. Someone taps your shoulder again. You expect the gatekeeper, but no, it's a small boy, no older than 10, dressed in page livery. His eyes are downcast as he offers you a card on a silver tray. You take it. The card reads, simply, "Choose your name and leave the old one here." You look back at the tray and now there's a bowl. Inside other cards, some handwritten in ink, others burned along the edges. One reads The Fox, another says Celeste. One is just a question mark. You hesitate, then write something. You don't even know why you choose that name, but it fits. You place the card into the bowl. The boy gives a tiny bow and vanishes as silently as he arrived. From across the room, a group begins to laugh at something unseen. You follow their gaze to an alcove. There's a couple playing chess, but every piece they capture seems to trigger a new surprise. A light dimming, a drawer opening, a curtain shifting. Someone claps. You not sure if they impressed by the game or by the manipulation of space itself. You move toward the staircase, but the gatekeeper is already there, waiting. He tilts his head once, then steps aside. Permission granted. You place your slippered foot on the first step and begin to rise. The staircase curves upward like a ribbon of dark marble and velvet. Each step makes a soft thump beneath your feet, solid, yet muffled, like walking on secrets. The candlelight grows dimmer as you ascend, but richer, somehow warmer, almost amber. The scents thicken too: clove, musk, powdered iris, and something beneath all that, something faintly metallic. At the top of the stairs, another woman waits. She doesn't speak. She holds out a silver tray with a black satin mask and a comb. You understand the ritual now. One more layer between you and who you were. You comb your hair with slow fingers just as she watches, saying nothing, and then tie the mask gently over your face. You look into the mirror behind her. You're not you anymore. Not entirely. You're whoever this house allows you to become. This floor is quieter than the salon below. The walls are lined with silk, painted in soft, mural-like strokes, scenes of Arcadia, of Dionysian revels, and a few things that wouldn't look out of place on the ceiling of a Roman bathhouse. A man in a powdered wig walks past you. His coat is embroidered with tiny glass beads that catch the candlelight in dazzling flashes. His mask is shaped like a sunburst. He nods once, respectfully, and moves on. Your guide appears again, though you're no longer sure it's the same person. Another robe, another scent. Maybe they cycle them out. Maybe you're hallucinating the repetition. This guide brings you to a chamber lined with soft, glowing lanterns and a strange, citrusy perfume. You're helped out of your outer coat. Your slippers are swapped for thinner ones. And then you're ushered into what they call preparation. Now comes the powder. They dust your skin with fine, scented talc. Not everywhere. Just the neck, wrists, behind the ears. It smells like sandalwood and orange blossom. And though it seems ceremonial, there's practical logic. Here your scent now matches the room. You become harder to trace. In 1700s Venice, cleanliness was complicated. Baths were rare. Scent was armor. Perfumed powders masked everything: sweat, illness, and bad decisions. Entire economies flourished around apothecaries, who created signature scents for clients at places like this. A fringe tidbit. Some Venetian nobles insisted their servants powder them with crushed pearls before public appearances, believing it gave their skin a luminous, almost divine glow. You're brought to a side table with an ornate wooden box. Your guide opens it slowly, revealing dozens of glass bottles, all labeled in looping Latin or archaic French. Each contains a liquid more radiant than the last: pinks, ambers, greens, like absinthe. You're told to choose one. You point to a pale lavender vial. The guide dips a brush inside and paints a small stroke along the inside of your wrist. Acceptable, they murmur. The room you're led to next is smaller, intimate, walls covered in thick curtains that seem to breathe slightly when you pass. A low table sits at the center, where two other guests lounge on cushions. One wears a fox mask, the other wears none at all, but their face is painted stark white, with blue tears drawn beneath each eye. They don't ask your name. That's the rule. Someone pours tea, hot and dark-hand, passes you a small spoon covered in crystallized rose petals. You stir them in, and the liquid turns a soft blush. Now, protocol. A woman enters. She is older than the others, commanding, not a hostess. She clears her throat softly and begins to speak in perfect Latin, then French, then Italian, finally in English. Her voice is melodic, hypnotic. She recites the house's 10 courtesies, not rules courtesies. 1. Leave your title at the door. 2. No mask shall be forcibly removed. 3. No touch without invitation. 4. No truth must be spoken twice. 5. What is whispered stays whispered. 6. No coin is exchanged within walls. 7. Do not open closed doors uninvited. 8. A refusal is sacred. 9. Names dissolve at sunrise. 10. No one is real until they leave. A joke for your nerves. You're starting to feel like you're at a Hogwarts orientation designed by Oscar Wilde. Historians still argue whether Venetian pleasure houses had formal codes like this. Some claim these were invented later, romanticized in diaries by faded nobles trying to give their wild years some structure. Others insist courtesan-led houses developed sophisticated rituals to keep peace among the chaos of lust and ego. Back in the room, someone asks you softly what you've forgotten. It takes you a moment to realize that it's part of the game, or ritual, or test. You answer, "My name." The person nods, a single voice humming a lullaby. The others rise, one by one, and leave the room silently. Your guide returns, gestures you forward once more. You move through another curtain, and suddenly the air is cooler. You're in a long hallway now, lit only by candle sconces. On the floor, tiles form intricate patterns of stars and vines, and your slippers whisper across them like silk moths. A final detail catches your eye. Each candle is different, some tall and white, others short and crimson. One has a twisted black wick that refuses to burn. They're not there for light, they're there for meaning. You just don't know what yet. At the far end of the hall stands a pair of doors, slightly ajar. You inhale and step forward. You push gently on the doors, and they part with a sigh-heavy oak, groaning like it's remembering all the stories it has swallowed. The room inside is wider than you expected. It opens up like a breath held too long and finally released. A domed ceiling arches overhead, painted with frescoes, nymphs, satyrs, and celestial bodies swirling in a dreamlike dance. But unlike most ceilings, this one is alive, with motion, not literal motion, but the kind that tricks the eye. Wherever you look, something seems to shift just out of your peripheral vision. A star streaks, a veil flutters, a hand reaches. Welcome to the candlelit lounge. The room is warm, golden, alive with quiet elegance. It smells of citrus peels and old wood polish, layered with the familiar hint of tobacco and something more exotic. The kind of spice that makes your tongue tingle before you've even tasted it. Dozens of guests recline on low divans and velvet cushions. No one sits upright. That's not the vibe. Conversation flows here like a stream winding through a forest, sometimes audible, often not. You catch flashes of languages, chuckles, sighs. A man recites something in Latin. A A woman counterpoints with a line of Ovid misquoted, but forgivably so. Someone plays a gentle melody on a harpsichord tucked into the shadows. This is where people linger, the social middle ground. You're not quite ascending into mystery, not quite descending into chaos. It's the pause between the two. You make your way to the edge of the room, letting your fingers drift across the curved spine of a chaise. A server materializes from nowhere, offers you a flute of champagne, and vanishes again like a magician between acts. Champagne in Venice, oh yes. By the mid-1700s, imported French wines were a staple in upper-class Venetian casini. The bubbling drink wasn't just indulgent, it was status. Historians still debate whether some houses had direct contracts with French vineyards, but one thing's certain: if your flute didn't fizz, your house didn't matter. You sip, it's dry, crisp, with a strange finish like orange peel and maybe ... fennel. A woman beside you raises her glass in a silent toast. Her mask is shaped like a moth. You clink wordlessly. In this room, everyone performs, not always with words. Posture, glance, choice of drinkery detail is part of the silent script. You don't talk about who you are, you show it. Across the room, a man begins to hum a barcarolle, the melody low and unsteady. He's clearly had more of the champagne than you have. A small circle gathers near him, half listening. A lute begins to join in, played by a courtesan, draped across a divan-like melted wax. Her voice is smoky, ragged, and beautiful in that way only ruinous things can be. She sings in dialect, something about a fisherman and a girl who never left the island. The lyrics are suggestive, yes, but the beauty is in the rhythm, the way the words touch without gripping. A joke to keep your pulse down. You're 98% sure this is just karaoke night for dead poets. As you listen, a man with a mask shaped like a lion takes the cushion beside you. She only sings that when someone important enters, he murmurs. His voice is smooth, faintly accented. French or possibly Hungarian. Important, you ask. He shrugs. Or dangerous. Sometimes both. Another historical thread. Venetian courtesans were often multilingual, musically trained, and politically savvy. Many were more educated than their clients, and in certain circles, a courtesan's opinion could carry more weight than a bishop's. Some even trained as musicians at the Ospedale della, the same place where Vivaldi taught. A fringe tidbit. Some musical pieces performed in pleasure houses were never written down past orally between generations of courtesans, like heirlooms of melody, lost now except in dreams or dusty gossip journals. Suddenly, the lights dimmed out dramatically, just enough for the room to shift from golden to amber. A signal. Everyone seems to know what it means. Even you, though no one says a word. The music changes, tempos lower, heavier, the conversations hush, and from the far end of the lounge, a pair of performers begins to move. They don't speak, they glide, a dance, a mime, some ritual between theater and suggestions. Their masks are opposite halves of a Venetian moon, one laughing, one weeping. They act out a story of longing, mistaken identity, betrayal, and something else. The ending makes no sense. Or maybe it makes too much. Everyone claps softly, not for the performance, but because it's the custom. The masks bow and vanish through a tapestry. You notice now that the crowd has subtly changed. More guests have arrived. Some of the ones you met earlier have disappeared. The lounge breathes, like an animal with a heartbeat all its own. The man beside Eutha, one with the lion mask, leans close again. Careful, he says. This is the last room where things are still real. You glance at him. He stands, finishing his drink. Downstairs is power. Upstairs is dreams. But here, he gestures around with a half smile. This is where you still remember your own name, for now. He vanishes into a side corridor, taking his voice and his scent with him. You sit for a while longer, listening to the distant laughter, the barely audible music, the soft rustle of silks moving in time with the flickering candles, and then you stand. You're ready to move upward. You ascend again, this time not by stairs, but by instinct. The space to your left, hidden behind a velvet panel you could have sworn was just a wall, leads you into a narrower hall, darker, quieter. Here, the walls are padded with brocade, and the candlelight turns redder, warmer, like the glow inside a living thing. The music has changed, no longer delicate. It's deep, slow, a low thrumming of cello and breathy flute. You feel it in your ribs before you hear it in your ears. This part of the house isn't about arrival anymore. It's about immersion. A small archway opens onto a circular room. At its center sits a raised dais draped in rose-pink silk. Upon it reclines a woman in a costume that's halfway between goddess and musician in ivory gown. Bare shoulders, golden rings on every toe. A lute rests in her lap, and her mask is half off, revealing one eye and part of her mouth. She's already singing. Her voice is untrained but hypnotic. She sings in Venetian dialect, a language you only half understand, but something about the delivery cuts through. It's raw and sharp and aching. The lyrics, at first, they seem harmless. A sailor returns from sea to find his lover has vanished. Typical. But by the third verse, the metaphors are jagged. Her lover hasn't just vanished, he's forgotten her, replaced her, buried her name beneath another's perfume. You're not sure whether to feel charmed or called out. Around the room, guests lean in, some cry, others smile like they've just remembered an old wound that never quite healed. The woman sings as if no one's watching, as if she's tearing a page out of her soul and offering it to the fire. You sit, you listen, you forget to breathe. In 18th century Venice, music was everywhere, but courtesan music, especially inside places like this, was its own genre. Private songs, often improvised, lyrics changed based on who was present. Some songs survived only in the memory of those who heard them, then not for long. Historians still argue whether the so-called canzone del Maschertha, Song of Masks, was ever real, or whether it was just a legend passed down by wide-eyed visitors and bored librarians. A fringe tidbit: one famous courtesan, known only as La Selvatica, reportedly had her lute strung with horsehair soaked in absinthe. She claimed it helped her channel untamable feelings. The strings broke constantly. People came anyway. Back in the room, the lady with the lute stops mid-verse. Her hand hovers above the strings. She opens her eye, the one visible through her half-mask, and stares directly at you. She smiles, just a little. Then she begins the final verse, and for the first time, switches to English. He asked for a name she'd never spoken. He left her a ring that turned to smoke. She sang till her own name was broken, and never once laughed at the joke. The song ends on a dissonant chord. No applause. None is expected. The performance was not for praise. It was a spell, and you've just been caught in it. A robed attendant steps forward and offers the singer a drink in a silver cup. She takes a single sip, then slips her mask fully back into place, and with that, the spell breaks. The lights in the room shift subtly. A signal again. People begin to rise, moving toward the outer hall. But no one speaks, not yet. You move with them, all of you floating downstream on the echo of that voice. As you reach the corridor, a tall man leans toward you and murmurs, "She only sings to one person at a time, and tonight it was you." A joke, to keep the goosebumps manageable. Well, great. Now you're the chosen protagonist in a haunted mixtape. He smiles and moves on, leaving behind the scent of bergamot and dust. You continue walking until you find yourself in a darker hall, one with paintings that Dante seem to match the rest of the less myth, more memory. Each canvas depicts a woman playing an instrument, but their faces are blurred, their names scratched out, and underneath each painting a phrase. The one who listened. You pause before one. She's playing the violin, but it's twisted unnaturally, her hands at odd angles, her expression unreadable. You swear the background of the painting flickers, slightly like candlelight trapped in oil and pigment. A servant appears, offers you a fresh glass. You ask, "What is this?" She replies, "Something to remember, or something to forget." You choose, you choose, you sip. The flute tastes of honey and anise. It warms your throat and curls down your spine. When you blink, the lights seem brighter, and the hallway leans just a bit. You're led into another chamber. Not large, not ornate. A parlor with mirrored panels and low tables. Guests gather here to talk softly. The spell of music has loosened, and the room hums with story. You sit near a man recounting a night when a woman spoke to him in 7 languages, none of which he spoke. He's laughing now, but his hands shake a little. Someone else shares a riddle, supposedly left by a cardinal who once lost his title after falling in love with a Cassini performer. The riddle ends with a punchline that makes no sense, and everyone chuckles anyway. You find yourself speaking too, not loudly, just enough to let your voice join the room. You say something you haven't said in years, some truth buried under dust. No one reacts, but a nearby guest simply nods. You've been heard, that's enough. And above it all, the scent of rosewood and ash drifts in slow curls. You're beginning to understand. The lady with the lute didn't just perform, she revealed, and now you're marked by it. The scent changes before the scenery does. You catch it first faint, sandalwood laced with something medicinal, sharp, almost antiseptic. A servant waves a feathered fan in front of an archway draped in blue damask. Behind it, a library, or something pretending to be one. You step inside. The first thing you notice is the hush. Not silence, no. There's still the whisper of pages turning. The soft crackle of fire, but the kind of hush you find only in places where knowledge is dangerous. The ceiling curves low. Shelves rise higher than seems possible, crammed with volumes of every size and age. Gold-leaf titles glint in the candlelight. Some spines are labeled in Latin, others in Arabic, French, and a few in languages you don't recognize, possibly invented for the very purpose of disguise. There's a smell here beyond the wood and leather, something older, parchment, ink, and time itself, soaked into every page like wine into linen. This isn't a library for scholars. This is a library of forbidden things. You run your fingers along a row of bindings and pause at a small, cracked volume. Its title is handwritten, Il Salato del Nebi, the Parlor of Mists. No author, no date. You open it. The pages are dense with cramped script, strange punctuation, and illustrations of herbs. No, wait, those aren't plants. They're human nerves, drawn like ivy. Careful, murmurs a voice behind you, soft and amused. That one reads you, too. You close it gently and turn. A woman in a copper-colored gown is perched on a high-backed chair beside the hearth. She's older than most of the guests, Uve sign gray, hair curled neatly under a lace cap, her mask propped up on her forehead. She doesn't hide. That tells you something. You're just not sure what yet. I'm the keeper, she says, by way of introduction. And you're not the first curious soul to wander in. You half smile, trying to play it cool. I thought I was invited. She raises one eyebrow. Same thing, here. She gestures toward a locked case near the back. That one holds the dreams of a French nobleman who claimed to remember past lives. He wrote them all down, every lover, every duel. Some guests swear the ink changes color depending on who reads it, a joke to calm your nerves. Great, so now you're in the spiritual version of a pop-up book for aristocratic time travelers. A mainstream historical fact. Some Venetian salons and casini truly did maintain private libraries' collections of poetry, medical texts, and libertine literature banned by the church. Owners often paid priests for indulgences in exchange for silence, or stored copies under false floorboards to avoid raids. A fringe tidbit. One infamous house supposedly kept a book bound in human skin, though no proof survives. Still, wax-sealed pages have turned up in Venetian auctions, unreadable except by candlelight. The keeper watches you as you browse. You may choose one book to read while you're here, she says, but you must trade a memory in return. You laugh softly. She doesn't. I'm serious, she says, her voice low and clear. The house insists. It remembers things you give it. You ask what kind of memory. Not the kind you'd post in a letter, she replies. The kind you pretend you've forgotten, but haven't. You hesitate, then reach for a volume titled Rosé, et Velenorosis, and Poison. It's slim, unassuming, bound in faded red suede. Inside, a collection of letters between a Venetian widow and her husband's assassin. The tone is oddly tender. You sit near the fire and begin to read. The world outside the pages softens. You hear footsteps, laughter, the clink of glass, but it all fades as you turn each sheet. The widow writes of longing, of knowing too much and saying too little. The assassin replies in metaphor. One page is scorched along the edges. Another has a thumbprint smeared in wax. By the time you close the book, you realize you've forgotten where you are, and then poof, the keeper is gone. No footsteps, no goodbye. You set the book down and notice something new on the table beside it. A small bowl filled with slips of paper. Each bears a question written in different handwriting. You draw one. What name did you whisper the last time you were truly alone? You set it back down. You're done here. You rise and head for the archway, only to discover a second exit one you hadn't noticed before. A narrow staircase, lit by a single candle. You ascend again. This time, the air shifts fast. It grows warmer, closer. The scent of books fades. The sounds return. Laughter, music, the faint echo of footsteps. And yet, something follows you. A sense that you've left something behind, or that something small and vital just agreed to stay without your permission. At the top of the stairs, a masked servant waits. Did you find what you weren't looking for? He asks, voice muffled behind porcelain. You nod, because, yes. He steps aside, and the hallway bends once again into silk, scent, and shadows. You're no longer just a guest. Now, you carry the house with you. The corridor you now enter curves like a serpent, subtle, slow, always veering, just enough to confuse your sense of direction. The walls are clad in black velvet, embroidered with gold thread in patterns that resemble constellations. Above you, a narrow skylight filters in silver moonlight, as if the building has finally admitted the world outside exists, but only barely. The servant who greeted you at the top of the stairs is gone. You're alone now, or not. You hear faint footsteps ahead, soft laughter, the rustle of silk, and what might be a sigh. This level is different, less structured, more organic. The house no longer feels like a host. It feels like a creature that's drawn you deeper into its ribcage. You pause before a doorway rimmed in sapphire blue. Inside, mirrors. Not dozens, hundreds. The room is circular and entirely walled in angled mirrors of varying sizes. Some are cracked, others fogged at the edges. They reflect candlelight from a single chandelier, creating thousands of distorted stars that spin gently across the polished floor. You step inside. Immediately, your reflection multiplies in a dozen different directions: tall, short, sideways, fractured. One version of you is standing confidently. Another looks like it's mid-sob. Another has no eyes. It's a trick. You know that, but it works. You take one step forward, and all the reflections ripple. Then another figure enters the chamber from the opposite side, masked, tall, wearing crimson and silver. The figure mirrors your movements exactly like a dance or a warning. You step left, they step right. You raise a hand, so do they. But here's the unsettling part. In one of the mirrors, they don't follow. They pause, tilt their head, and smile. That version of them lifts their mask, but only in the reflection. You spin around, no mask removed, no face revealed. You glance back at the mirror. It's just you now, alone. A light joke to stay grounded. You're pretty sure you just walked into the Phantom of the Opera's Pinterest board. In 18th century Venice, mirror rooms weren't uncommon among the wealthy. They were seen as symbols of enlightenment and reflection, both literal and intellectual. But in places like this, mirrors served a different purpose: to disorient, to provoke, to reveal, and hide in the same breath. Historians still argue whether these mirror chambers were inspired by Eastern philosophies. Some say they were built after Venetian travelers brought back stories from Persian gardens filled with reflective tiles and illusions of infinity. A fringe tidbit: one well-documented Venetian Cassini supposedly had a mirror chamber in which all the glass was slightly warped to reflect the guest's inner state. Whether science, smoke, or strong liquor was responsible remains up for debate. You reach the center of the room, and the mirrors shift again. Now you're reflected not just as you are, but as who you were. A version of you from childhood, wide-eyed and barefoot. A version of you older, wearier, holding something broken in one hand and something sharp in the other. You see someone who once made a decision you've spent years defending, and someone who didn't. This room isn't for pleasure, it's for reckoning. A voice behind you speaks, low and precise. You may ask one question, but the answer will not be in words. You turn to see the crimson figure again, still masked, still impossibly still. You ask, without thinking, what do they see when they look at me? The figure gestures toward a mirror that had been previously dark. Now, it flickers with a sea knot, a reflection, but a memory. You recognize the place, a moment when someone you loved turned away from you, not angry, not bitter, just ... done. In the mirror, they don't look back. You swallow hard. You ask, "Can I change that?" But the figure has vanished. The room suddenly feels warmer. The mirrors begin to dim, one by one, like stars winking out before dawn. You're left standing with your reflection, alone, and, for the first time, it's just you. No illusions, no warps, just the tired, curious version of yourself you brought into this house. The chandelier overhead begins to retract into the ceiling. The door opens again, slowly. Time to leave the mirror chamber. As you step back into the hallway, something strange happens. You can hear your footsteps again, not muffled, not lost in velvet. Each step has weight now. You're heavier, grounded, but you also feel like you've left something behind. That, too, was the point. You continue down the corridor, which begins to slope upward again. The air thins, the walls widen. A breeze brushes your check-reel air, touched by the lagoon. Somewhere, a shutter has been opened. You begin to hear voices again. This time, they're not hushed. Laughter, open, honest, even a little rowdy. A violin plays a wild folk tune, and then someone stomps, claps, sings off-key. This part of the house is alive in a different way. You reach a landing where a thick rope curtain swings open automatically as you approach. You step through into the attical salon, and everything changes. The attic salon is nothing like the hushed elegance below. You expect restraint, shadows, a hush of candlelight. What greets you instead is a burst of color and chaos, a riot of fabric, laughter, music, and clashing perfumes. This is where the rules get looser, maybe where they vanish altogether. The ceiling slopes overhead, low and timber-bird, beams exposed like the ribs of a great ship turned upside down. Strings of lanterns swing gently, casting soft halos of blue, rose, and amber across the crooked floorboards. The windows here, yes, there are actual windows, are cracked open just enough to let in the damp breath of the Venetian night. You can smell the salt of the lagoon, the faint sourness of canal water, and the distant, ghostly chime of a bell tower far across the city. This is the house's final level before the unknown, and it buzzes with life. Guests fill the room, lounging, laughing, some mid-debate, others mid-song. Masks here are wilder, less elegant. One man wears a papier, M-chirk crocodile snow. A woman sports a velvet domino mask with tiny bells sewn along the brow. Someone's dressed entirely in red silk, coiled like a serpent around their own body. And then there's a person wearing nothing but powdered hair and shoes, reclining on a purple settee, speaking fluent Latin to a stuffed raven. You are no longer among pretenders. You're among performers. Or perhaps the ones who have stopped performing altogether. Someone presses a glass into your hand without asking. You glance down. It's a deep red liquid that smells of cherry and vinegar, vino devioli. You think, sour cherry wine, once illegal to serve in Venetian parlors. To peasant, to sweet, to sincere, you sip. It burns. A joke to steady your nerves. You've entered the Cirque du Soleil of 1700's social transgression, and you're definitely underdressed. But the others don't seem to mind. You're greeted not with suspicion, but with giddy curiosity. Someone with a fox mask touches your shoulder. What's your sin tonight? they ask. But you know they're not expecting an answer. It's a password, a dare. You respond, whichever one you're avoiding. The fox laughs and spins away. A mainstream historical fact. By the mid-18th century, Venetian pleasure houses had begun to fragment. The traditional casini secretive, elegant, aristocratic, were being replaced by louder, more experimental salons. Bohemian thinkers, bankrupt nobles, exiled artists all found refuge in upper floors like this. And it wasn't uncommon for these spaces to blur the line between theater, philosophy, and seduction. A fringe tidbit: one famed salon in San Polo was supposedly run by a former opera singer who hosted midnight debates entirely in rhyme. Guests competed for favors by reciting political arguments in verse. The winner, a mask made of gilded fish scales, and a private chamber for the night. Here in the attic, the debate is a game of shadows. Literally, you notice a makeshift stage at one end of the room. A white curtain hangs, and behind it, two figures move with precision, casting silhouettes in candlelight. One grows taller with every step, the other shorter, until the larger seems to devour the smaller entirely. Guests cheer. Someone hurls a flower. You can't tell if it's performance or confession. Then, without warning, a trio of masked figures takes the floor. Their costumes match the color of tarnished copper, embroidered with lightning bolts and tiny vines. They link arms and begin to chant. Not in Latin, not Italian. Something older, wetter, like Breton or Old Gaelic. The rhythm is mesmerizing. Someone whispers in your ear, they're channeling the drowned. You turn, but the speaker is already gone. The music shifts, again flutes now, and a tambourine. You see someone dancing in a spiral, trailing scarves, dipped in perfumes. Each loop leaves a new scent in the air. Vanilla, pine, blood orange, wet soil. It's not choreography, it's invocation. You take another sip of the wine. Your lips are stained red now, and you can't tell if it's the cherry or your own heat. Then you see her. Across the room, seated on a throne made of mismatched cushions and cracked mirrors, is a figure draped in dark plum. Her mask is obsidian black, but faintly translucent. Who can see her eyes flickering beneath? Not cruel, not welcoming, just watchful. The others orbit her in subtle ways, glancing, nodding, avoiding her direct gaze. You realize quickly, she's not a hostess. She's something closer to a high priestess of this strange liturgy. She beckons you with a single gloved finger. You walk. It's not a long walk, but your heartbeat makes it feel like miles. When you reach her, she leans forward and offers you a folded piece of parchment. You accept it, unsure what to do. She murmurs, "Don't read it until you forget who gave it to you." And just like that, she waves you away. You return to the edge of the crowd, dazed, heart galloping. A joke now. You just got cryptically cursed by a Venetian oracle, and somehow feel flattered about it. You tuck the parchment into your sleeve. The room is spinning in slow circles now, not from dizziness, but because everyone here is dancing, drinking, storytelling in motions that repeat and ripple like tides. You are no longer a spectator. You are part of this. Someone asks if you'll recite something, a poem, a secret, even a lie. You answer without thinking, your voice thick with cherry wine and whatever spell this house has placed on you. You say, "Once, I left a door unlocked that should have stayed closed." The crowd murmurs approval. The dance continues. And somewhere below, the rest of the house breathes a little deeper. The attic salon fades behind you like the last notes of a dream you can quite remember. You descend not by stairs this time, but through a tapestry. Literally, it's woven from golden threads, thin as hair, shimmering with the light of the room you leave behind. You don't step through it to slip. For a moment, there's only darkness, thick and velvet soft, and then the world reshapes itself. You're in a narrow corridor, cool again, quiet, too quiet. The air is different, here drier. Gone are the perfumes, the smoke, the wine-slick chatter. You smell paper and salt and wax, something ancient, something buried. You've arrived at what the house calls the vault. This is not a public chamber. No one waits for you. There is no servant with a glass, no music, just a hallway with 5 doors each painted with a single symbol, a crescent moon, a pair of eyes, a key, a flame, a mask, a brass sign nearby reads, 1 door, 1 hour. What you take, you keep. What you lose, you may not notice. You hesitate. This isn't theater anymore. This is something else. You choose the door with the key. It opens with the sound of something ancient. Inside is a chamber lined entirely in boxes. Not crates or trunks, boxes of all shapes and sizes. Lacquered wood, polished ivory, cracked leather, glass with fogged edges. Some are large enough to hold books, others no bigger than a ring box. And each one is labeled, not with names, with moments. The second time he lied, when she learned to smile without joy. That night, with the cold bread, you almost said it, but didn't. The glove that never returned. These are not items. These are memories, not just yours. Everyone's. You reach out to touch one, but hesitate. What happens if you open it? A mainstream historical fact. Though we associate 18th century Venice with flamboyant indulgence, there were deeply spiritual and even occult undercurrents to its nightlife. Certain casini were rumored to serve as gathering places for secret societies, philosophical orders, and those obsessed with memory, fate, and the manipulation of identity. A fringe tidbit. In a now-lost diary belonging to a Venetian apothecary named Gianni dell'Orto, he claimed to have delivered nightly memory tinctures to an anonymous patron whose instructions were always the same. 1 drop per lie, 2 for regret, none for forgiveness. Historians still argue whether dell'Orto was mad, mystic, or just broke. Back in the vault, you pick up a box labeled, "The time you said yes without wanting to." It's cold in your hand, slightly heavier than it should be. You open it. Inside, nothing, no object, no trinket, just a faint sound of breath, maybe. A single moment exhaled into a space where time pooled and never left. But it rushes back to you, not the event itself, not the details, just the feeling. Tension in the chest, that false smile, the aftertaste of someone else's expectations. You close the box. Your fingers tremble slightly, and then you notice something unsettling. Your sleeves are empty. The folded parchment, the woman in plum gave Yui's, gone, no trace, as if it never existed. You look around. One of the boxes now reads, "The note you shouldn't have read yet." You step away, heart hammering. You don't open another. Instead, you move to the far end of the room where a second sign waits. You may leave with 1 box. You look back, hundreds to choose from. Regrets, betrayals, moments of pure joy, quiet realizations, lost kisses, unspoken apologies. You pick one at random. The laugh that broke the spell. You don't know what it means. You tuck it into your coat. As you leave the chamber, the air feels slightly heavier, but clearer, like a thunderstorm passed through while you weren't looking. You're not sure what you've taken with you. You're even less sure what you left behind. The hallway welcomes you again. The velvet underfoot now gives way to marble tile, cool, veined, damp with condensation. The sound of water reaches your ears, slow trickles, quiet splashes, as though the house itself is hydrating after a long night of remembering. And then you see it, a small fountain at the junction of 3 new corridors. It gurgles softly, lit by a lantern that dangles from a chain above. The fountain is shaped like an open hand, water spilling gently from its palm. You cup some in your own hand. It's cold, crisp. You drink. It tastes like minerals, like dust, like secrets. And then a door opens just to your left. No one beckons, but you know. This next part will not be metaphor. It will be real. You step through, and the house closes the vault behind you. The moment you step through the next threshold, the texture of the world changes. You've been through rooms of mirrors, velvet, and smoke, but this place is made of stone. Raw, uneven, and unvarnished. The kind of stone that remembers water, earthquakes, and footsteps. The air is colder here, and still. Not the hush of reverence, more like the silence that settles in after something has ended. You're underground, beneath the house. Beneath even the canals, maybe. A slow torchlight flickers along the walls, revealing what looks like a long, curving tunnel, vaulted and ribbed like the belly of some ancient cathedral. But the further you walk, the more it becomes something else entirely. This isn't architecture, it's anatomy. Arches curve like ribs. Niches in the walls resemble eye sockets. The floors slope like spines. You're walking through the house's memory of itself, and that memory has bones. You hear soft music again, but it doesn't come from any instrument. It hums through the stone, reverberating faintly like a heartbeat echoing in water. Every few steps, you pass an alcove. Inside, strange artifacts. A cracked porcelain mask suspended by silver wire. A broken violin string coiled around a single glove. A pair of velvet slippers, their soles stained. There are no labels, no explanations, just offerings. This is the reliquary, a mainstream historical fact. Some Venetian casini were built directly atop older Roman structures' foundations, repurposed catacombs, walled off and turned into cellars. Beneath Venice lies a maze of forgotten basements and crypts. Some served as wine vaults, others became private ritual spaces quietly rented out to secret societies or philosophers too scandalous for the salons upstairs. A fringe tidbit. In 1749, a visitor from Prague described a hidden level beneath a house of delight, where guests were asked to walk barefoot across a cold stone floor while carrying a sealed jar containing a flickering candle. If the flame dies, he wrote, you have remembered too much. Historians still debate whether the passage was metaphorical confession. Ahead, the tunnel narrows, then opens abruptly into a circular chamber. And there, seated in a ring around the room, are 7 masked figures, each one completely still. Their masks are not beautiful like the ones above. They're crude, clay, wood, bone, carved with symbols, some with runes, one with a spider scratched into the forehead. They don't move when you enter, but they know you're here. A single stool waits for you in the center of the circle. You hesitate, but sit. There's no sound but your own breath. Then, without a signal, one of the masked figures begins to speak. The voice is low and feminine, but gravelly, like someone pulling memories from a place too deep for comfort. You've touched the house, she says. Another adds, "You've worn its stories." A third, "Now you may ask one thing." You nod, slowly. You think for a moment, then speak. "Why do people come here?" There is no laughter, no riddle, just a moment of shared breath. Then the first voice replies, "To forget what they pretended to enjoy." The second, "To remember what they were not allowed to love." A third, almost a whisper, "To feel something unpolished." And then the oldest sounding voice, deep and deliberate, "Because truth is unbearable in daylight." They fall silent again. The flames dim slightly. The seventh figure, who hasn't moved this whole time, finally raises their hand and points to your chest. Not accusatory, more like they're recognizing something you forgot to notice. Your coat pocket feels heavy. You reach in. The small box you chose earlier, the laugh that broke the spells glowing faintly. You set it on the floor, and one of the figures nods. They all rise at once. The room grows colder, and from behind them, a door you hadn't seen creaks open, not on hinges, but like stone shifting beneath pressure. They file out slowly, one by one, into that waiting dark. You're left alone with the box. You hesitate, then open it. This time, there's something inside. It's a sound. You hear yourself, laughing, not how you laugh at a party or in small talk, but that other kind of laugh. The kind that comes after something terrible, when the truth finally breaks and there's nothing left to protect. It's sharp, wild, honest, and then it fades. You close the box again. The door remains open. You rise and walk through it. You expect more darkness. Instead, you're standing at the edge of a shallow pool. Lit from beneath, the water glows gold. Not reflective, just glowing, like liquid memory. All around the pool are masks, hundreds, placed in neat rows, facing inward. They're not worn, they've been retired. You recognize a few: the fox, the moth, the lion, even the crimson face from the mirror room. You understand now. This is where people leave behind the characters they no longer wish to carry. You're meant to do the same. You remove your mask, except you haven't been wearing one, have you? You look down at your reflection. Your face looks older, not by years, by miles. You kneel beside the pool. Lower the box into the water. It doesn't sink. It drifts, slow and steady, toward the center of the pool until it glows even brighter, then flickers out completely. The water stills, and the door behind you closes. Time to go. You turn from the glowing pool, still unsure whether you've released something or invited it to stay. The corridor that now stretches ahead is no longer velvet or marble. It's bricks, simple, raw, and worn smooth by centuries of feet that passed before yours. You touch the wall. It's damp and oddly warm, like the inside of a wrist. This is not part of the house they show anyone, and you are no longer here by invitation. You follow the path. The light is dimmer now, more natural. No gilded sconces or perfumed lanterns. Just small, irregular slits in the walls through which you glimpse the lagoon outside its surface, moon-slicked black as ink. You're beneath the city now. Beneath stories and salons and all those carefully crafted illusions. You pass a set of stairs leading up. They're blocked off by a lattice of iron and roses reel. Roses, pale and wilting, woven tightly into the bars. You smell them before you see them. Not fresh, but not quite dead. Somewhere in between. A note is pinned to the iron in delicate script. This staircase leads back to the person you used to be. Most guests choose not to return. You don't try it. Instead, you keep walking. The corridor curves again, and suddenly you're in another chamber, this one low-ceilinged, candlelit and round. In its center sits a single chair, upholstered in threadbare velvet. Across from it, a mirror, plain, untouched. This is the room of confrontation, not spectacle, not performance, reflection. You sit. At first, the mirror shows you as you are. Same face, same posture. You wait for the trick snow flickering. No second image, no illusions, just you. But slowly, the mirror begins to respond, with distortion, but emphasis. Your posture tightens, your expression sharpens. You watch your own hands clench slightly in your lap. You feel seen, not by someone else, but by something inside you that you've worked hard to silence. You hear a voice, soft, familiar, your own. "Did you come here for pleasure?" it asks. You hesitate. "No." You say. "Did you come here for truth?" You're not sure. The reflection tilts its head. "Then why are you still here?" You can't answer that. Not yet. A mainstream historical fact. Certain Venetian pleasure houses were known not just for indulgence, but for their rooms of reflection, quiet, meditative spaces where guests were encouraged to speak their secrets aloud, to confront guilt, fear, longing. These were often inspired by monastic confessionals, but with no priest, no absolution, just listening walls, a fringe tidbit. In one surviving guestbook from 1772, someone wrote only a single line: "I did not come here to be forgiven. I came to remember what I buried." The handwriting matches no known records. Historians still argue whether this was poetry, metaphor, or a coded confession. Back in the mirror room, your image shifts again. This time, the reflection is smiling, not kindly, not cruelly, but knowingly. You reach out, and your fingertips brush cool glass. You whisper, "I see you." And the reflection yourself nods once. The room darkens. When the lights return, the mirror is empty. No more image, just you, sitting in a chair, staring at blank glass. You stand. You're changed now, not in any visible way, but you've seen too much of yourself to go back to being a spectator. You leave the room. The hallway opens into a wider space, no longer enclosed. You are now under the stars. An open courtyard, hidden within the center of the house, its presence cleverly veiled from every direction. Walls of ivy, open sky above. The lagoon glimmers through iron arches. You hear the city again, the creak of boats, the distant thump of oars, a dog barking in the far-off dark. You are alone, but the house is still awake. Somewhere behind you, laughter echoes faintly. A violin is tuning up again. The party continues for others, but not for you. You've moved beyond the velvet, beyond the masks. You've seen what lies beneath the pleasure. Not guilt, not shame, just weight. The beautiful, unbearable gravity of being fully known. There is a stone bench near the fountain. You sit. A servant appears, not masked, not silent, just a woman, barefoot, carrying a tray with a glass of clear liquid. "Final drink," she says gently. You take it. Sip water, perfectly cold. Exactly what you needed. She places something else beside you, a small, sealed envelope with no writing. Then she bows and leaves, disappearing between the ivy-covered walls. You stare at the envelope. You don't open it, not yet. Instead, you rest and let the night breathe around you. The silence here is not empty, it's earned. It's what follows laughter, confession, performance, even fear. A hush so full of meaning that it feels like a presence itself. The faintest hint of fish markets miles away. You're surrounded by ivy-covered walls and cracked sculptures of forgotten gods. A cherub missing its mouth, a satyr whose eyes have eroded into pits, a lioness with no claws. You sit there on the stone bench, the envelope beside you, and realize the house isn't done with you. Not yet. But it's giving you this son intermission. You wonder how many people have sat exactly where you are, staring up at that same moon. How many of them left changed? How many didn't leave at all? The air smells like the lagoon, again salt and moss and metal. Even the divine here has softened into memory. You lean back and glance at the sky. The moon is visible, now low, swollen, yellow-white. You touch the envelope, still sealed, still blank. The temptation to open it pulses like a heartbeat, but you wait. Each one bears a name, hand-painted and fluttering faintly as you pass. Something shifts in the air so subtly, you almost don't notice. A new warmth, a faint breeze, the distant sound of humming, almost a lullaby. You follow it instinctively, rising from the bench and walking barefoot, now across cold stone, your shoes gone. You don't remember taking them off. That's happening more now, little forgettings, maybe gifts, maybe trades. In the 1760s, a secret society called I Senzinome held masked gatherings, where the only rule was, never speak your own name aloud. The belief was that names trapped souls, like glass jars catching butterflies. Some of their members vanished entirely by choice or otherwise. You follow the humming into a narrow corridor lit by paper lanterns. Julia Lorenzo, Madame Rossetti. You part it and emerge into what looks like a small chapel, though no god is honored here. Alaric. They drip wax like tears into glass bowls, each bowl holding small fragments, a ring, a braid of hair, a playing card, a coin scorched black. You kneel beside one, compelled you, not burning live, as if the house has absorbed the shape of you. Your steps, your silence, your pulse. Venetian nobility were obsessed with names, reputation, lineage, the echo of one's title across salons and scandals alike. Names carried weight. To be anonymous was dangerous. To be known was currency. That last one stops you. A lantern with your name, not just your first name, but your full name, a detail you never gave to anyone tonight. You reach up and touch the paper. It's warm. A mainstream historical fact. A fringe tidbit, some looking proud, some sorrowful, some in midlife. Historians still debate whether the name game was philosophical or criminal. You move on. The hallway narrows again, then ends abruptly, not in a door, but in a curtain of feathers, soft, ivory, silent. The altar is bare, but around it, dozens of candles flicker on shelves. Ledges, the floor. Your reflection dances in the melted wax. Then you hear a voice not beside you, but within you. You may leave one truth here. You don't know if it's imagination, hypnosis, or something older. But you answer, softly, honestly. I stayed too long because I didn't want to be remembered the way I left. As soon as you say it, one of the candles flares, then extinguishes, the air stirs. You've made your deposit. You rise, and the chapel feels lighter. The house accepts your offering. You follow a low hallway now that descends into soft carpet and golden light. You pass framed silhouettes, profiles of guests long gone. No names, just outlines. And then, without fanfare, you reach the door of re-entry. It's simple, oak, carved, no handle, just a plaque of what you've seen. The bells begin to chime somewhere deep in the city's belly. 6 times. Once you pass through, you may not speak of what happened above, below, or within. Your shoes are still missing. Your coat is still damp with candle scent. And in your pocket nothing. You may remember, but only in dreams. You stare at the wood. It doesn't move. It waits. You reach for the envelope in your coat, still unopened. You tear the seal. Inside, a single phrase, handwritten in the same script from the barred staircase. You are ready to forget who you were pretending to be. You exhale. It sounds like relief. The door opens on its own. Light spills in, morning light, pale, pink, wet with mist. You step out and find yourself at the edge of the Grand Canal. The house behind you is already gone. Just water. A small pier. A man in a gondola nodding in your direction. You step in, sit. He doesn't ask your name. You don't offer it. You watch Venice pass quiet, waking, unaware of where you've been. Dawn. The gondolier hums an old folk tune. The water laps at the boat like a whisper. Not even the envelope. Just the quiet echo of a laugh that once broke a spell. Nor do you feel the need to. Venice is still sleepy, cloaked in that soft post-dawn mist that erases hard edges. The domes of churches rise like pale ghosts above the rooftops. Laundry flutters between windows in pastel ribbons. The city is waking up, but it's not awake, not really. You're in the in-between, still leaving the house, still not home. The gondolier pulls gently on the oar, setting a slow, deliberate rhythm. You lean back and let yourself sway with it. The motion is hypnotic, almost womb-like. You pass beneath a series of arches where pigeons roost, their wings fluttering like restless thoughts. And then the gondola stops. You look around. No landing, no bridge, just a wall of rose-colored stone and a metal ring bolted at water level. Here, his voice is gravelly, accented, and entirely unsurprised. You wait for instruction, but he says nothing else. So you climb. Yes, climb. There's no other way. You grab the rusted ring, plant your feet on the slippery stone, and hoist yourself up. And how many fell? A joke now. You just crawled out of a Venetian dreamscape, only to be dropped in a historical American Ninja Warrior episode. At the top of the wall, you find yourself in a courtyard. Not the same one from the house, which makes perfect sense, because this is the return layer, not a place on any map, but a mental space, a decompression chamber between experience and memory. It's subtle, but effective. You walk across cobblestones. They feel too real, after all, the plush, velvet, and echoing marble. Each step sounds like it matters. You see a cat grooming itself on a ledge, a baker delivering trays of warm bread, a small boy tossing crumbs to pigeons and pretending he's a king. Normal, but wrong, too. Because you don't feel like the person who lived in this world yesterday. A mainstream historical fact. After major events, wars, festivals, scandals, Venetians often retreated into routines with extreme devotion. The rhythm of gondolas, of markets, of bell towers, they weren't just practical. They were medicine, ritual, a way to scrub the surreal out of the bloodstream. A fringe tidbit: some aristocrats reportedly hired actors to reenact their own lives for them after returning from exotic journeys, to remind them how they once were. One nobleman paid a full troupe to eat dinner in his home nightly, arguing and laughing exactly the way his family used to before they died. You turn a corner and see yourself, or rather, your reflection, in a shop window. Except it doesn't look right. Your hair's tousled in a way that's almost theatrical. Your collar is stained faintly with wax, and your eyes, they look older or wiser, or simply less concerned with being understood. You step closer to the glass. A note is taped to the window. It reads, "Don't forget, you forgot something." You blink. Look again. The note's gone. The window now shows pastries. You're back in the waking world, but the echo of the house lingers. You keep walking, now through alleys and bridges that slowly begin to resemble the parts of Venice you know. Familiar shops, the basilica's towers in the distance, a street performer tuning his violin beside the fish market. And then you see her, the woman in plum. No mask this time, just an older face. Beautiful in the way that mountains are beautiful, weathered, unapologetic, immovable. She's seated on a bench by the water, feeding crumbs to the gulls. She doesn't acknowledge you, but she knows you see her, and you don't speak, because some things don't follow you out of the house, even when they do. You reach your quarters, or perhaps your hotel, or perhaps your home. It's hard to say. The place you enter is definitely yours, but it feels slightly out of focus, like a version of reality viewed through fogged glass. You step inside, remove your coat, shake out your hair, and find on your bedside table a familiar object, the little box, the one from the vault, the laugh that broke the spell. You open it. There's nothing inside, just air, and yet you smile, because now you understand. The spell wasn't someone else's, it was yours. You don't remember falling asleep. One moment, you're sitting on the edge of your bed, holding the empty box. The next, you're in a dream, but it's not the hazy, illogical kind. It's precise, clean, only it's upside down. And in the center of it all, floating, not walking, is the figure in the obsidian mask. The stairs rise downward. The chandeliers glow from the floor. Velvet carpets cling to the ceiling like ivy. Her eyes find you again, just as they did before. You try to speak, but your voice doesn't work here. She holds up one hand, in her palm, a mirror. It doesn't reflect you. You want to shatter it. Reach through it. Tell that version it's okay to let go. It reflects a younger version of you, one that's still masked, still posing, still clinging to a shape that no longer fits. But she closes her hand, and the mirror vanishes into ash. You wake up with a gasp. Morning again. This time, the sun feels sharper. You move slowly, your body reluctant, like it knows you've returned from someplace deep. You reach for water, and that's when you see it. Your hands, the tiniest flecks of wax, still cling to your fingertips. You rub them together. They melt back into skin. A reminder. You check the box again. Still empty, but it's warm now. No envelope. Just your name, scrawled in that same strange ink from the house's plaques, as if something inside you has replaced what was once inside it. A knock on the door. You open it cautiously, a bellboy or a servant, depending on where you believe you are first. A folded note on a silver tray. You unfold it. Tonight, the doors reopen, but only if you forget they ever closed. You look up, but the bellboy is already gone. No footsteps, no sound. Masks hang in shop windows, waiting to be bought by those who think they understand what they mean. You set the note aside, dress, walk to the window. Outside, Venice continues its day, and yet you feel something threaded through the fabric of the world and awareness. Like the house left a handprint on reality, on you, not because you have to, but because you know something waits there. A door, the same one from the end of your night at the house, carved oak. No handle, Gondolas drift, tourists chatter. A nun chides a pigeon from her windowsill. Everything is as it was. You make your way to the piazza. Open, bread bakes. You catch your reflection again in a shop mirror. No mask now, no costume, just your face, and a softness in your eyes that wasn't there before. Many guests of Venetian pleasure houses believed that what happened inside wasn't just entertainment, it was initiation into what they couldn't say. But few came out the same. Many went on to change their names, leave their titles, disappear altogether. They weren't lost, just rewritten. You head down an alley, but this time it's just a wall. A letter dated 1775 describes a man who returned from such a house claiming he had lived an entire other life inside 20 years. A wife, children, war, peace, all of it. And when he left, only a single night had passed. The only proof he offered, a small painting of a woman no one could identify, in a style unknown to the time. No entrance. The house has receded again. You weren't supposed to come back. Not yet. When the performance becomes exhausting, when pleasure becomes hollow, and something deeper begins to call. And that's okay, because it never really leaves, does it? A mainstream historical fact, a fringe tidbit. Historians still argue if it was madness or genius in disguise. Back in the alley, you touch the brick. It's solid, warm from the sun. But something beneath it still breathes. You smile. You understand now that the house is not a place, it's a threshold. It's where people go when the truth becomes heavier than the lie. You keep walking. The streets of Venice unfold around you like pages you've already read, but now understand. And as you move through them, you notice something. A woman wearing plum silk crossing the bridge ahead. A man with a fox tattoo behind his ear buying lemons. A pair of crimson shoes placed beside a window. The house is still with you, and its guests walk among the rest of the world, quieter now, knowing what they know, not flaunting it, just living it. And somewhere, behind the veil of stone and canal and shadow, the music is starting up again, because the house never sleeps, it only waits. You wander aimlessly now. If anything you do can still be called aimless, there's a lingering sense that the house rewired something inside you. Not your thoughts, exactly, but how they arrange themselves. You notice more. The crack in the stone arch over your head shaped vaguely like a heart. The way the gondoliers nod to each other, not as a greeting, but like co-conspirators who've seen too much. You pause near a faded palazzo whose windows are sealed with wooden shutters. A cat lies on the ledge above, tail flicking, and you feel it again. That vibration, low, warm, bone deep. The air shimmers, just for a second. Not sound, not light, presence. You're not in the house, stained with brine, but it hasn't let go. You walk on, and eventually find yourself at the fish market. It's noisy here, grounded, the clatter of crates, the shouting of prices, the squonk of seagulls who believe themselves invited. In 1744, a butcher named Matteo claimed that every full moon, the marble slab at his fish stall grew warm. He insisted it was the house beneath, digesting the week. Authorities laughed, until the slab cracked clean down the middle and revealed a hollow space containing a mask made entirely of pressed lavender petals, plain canvas. And beyond that curtain, you don't go, but you could. A mainstream historical fact. The Rialto market has existed for over 700 years, but during the height of Venetian intrigue, some stalls doubled as message drops, covert meeting spots for informants, spies, or lovers whose reputations couldn't afford the light of day. A fringe tidbit. You buy nothing, but you nod at the eel seller. He nods back, like you've both agreed not to say what you're thinking. Later, you find yourself in a bookshop, the kind with leaning shelves and yellowing maps and cats that occupy entire corners like statues of judgment. The owner doesn't greet you, just gestures toward the back. No title on the spine, leather cracked and soft with age. You open it. The pages are blank, except one, in the center. When you are ready to return, the house will wear a different face, but it will still recognize yours. You close the book. The conductor wears a bird mask. The windows flicker with scenes you recognize. A woman smiling behind her fan. A mirror with no reflection. A candle you never lit, but somehow extinguished. Leave it where you found it. By now, the idea of returning doesn't feel strange, only inevitable. That night, you fall asleep, not in a bed, but in a gondola. Yes, again, you don't remember boarding it, but the water rocks you gently. The city is dark and murmuring around you. Moonlight rests on the canal like dust. You hear laughter echoing far off, a violin, a cork popping. Someone whispers your name. You do not wake, you dream. This time, the house is a train. It cuts through a foggy field, pulling carriages of gold and smoke. You don't board, you just watch. It's just traveling. It moves between places, between people, between stories. It shows up in the cracks between expectation and memory, between the person you've been pretending to be and the one you might become. It is not a pleasure house. It is a metamorphosis machine wearing lipstick and lace. And you are now part of its story. Whether you return or not, when you wake, it's dawn again. The water laps gently. The city breathes softly. And in your coat pocket, a single feather, ivory, warm to the touch. Morning breaks like glass quietly, beautifully, and with 100 tiny fractures of light. You're awake, seated in the gondola again, the feather still in your hand. It shouldn't surprise you, not anymore. You don't remember asking for the ride, or even lying down. But somehow, the gondolier from before is back, face half in shadow beneath his wide-brimmed hat. He rose silently, no questions, no nods, and honestly, what would you say? Thanks for letting me accidentally time-slip into a memory cathedral disguised as a brothel. No, there are no words for where you've been, but you carry it now, just under your skin. The gondola docks at a quiet side street, a canal so narrow you could stretch your arms and touch both walls. The water is still and thick with rose petals. The gondolier holds out his hand not for money, but in partying. You shake it. It's warm, familiar, almost like your own hand. He nods once, and you step onto the stone. You're in a part of Venice that isn't on any map. That's not a metaphor. You check the alleys twist wrong. The bridges go nowhere. The shadows fall too slowly. And the people you pass, they're not looking at you, not ignoring you either. They're looking through you, as if you're not fully here, or they're not. One woman smiles at you gently, knowingly. She wears a brooch shaped like a mask, carved from white soapstone. A moth lands on her shoulder. She doesn't brush it away. A little girl clutches a book too big for her arms. Its title reads, Lessons for Those Who Almost Remembered. She offers it to you. You decline. You've already passed your lesson, or failed it. Either way, you keep walking. A mainstream historical fact. Venice was, and is, a labyrinth intentionally so, built to confuse, seduce, and protect. Even native Venetians sometimes lose their way, and that's not an accident, it's by design. You're not supposed to conquer Venice, you're supposed to surrender to it. A fringe tidbit. There are old city legends never printed, only whispered that certain streets rearrange themselves for those who return from the house beneath the masks. Streets that take you not to your hotel, or your lover, or your next appointment, but to what you still need to face. Historians still argue whether these tales are superstitions or maps. And you're walking one now. You stop in front of a mirror. Yes, again, but this time, it's not framed in gold or hung in velvet halls. It's just a puddle. Rainwater pooled on the stone. And when you look down, you see all of them. Every face you wore in the house. The flirt, the coward, the wanderer, the liar, the listener, the child who never cried, the lover who waited too long, the friend who left early, the dreamer who never dared. They look back at you, not accusingly, but patiently, waiting. You kneel, dip your fingers into the puddle. It ripples, they disappear. You're alone again, and yet never. You rise. And there it is, the building, stone, simple, unmarked, 2 shuttered windows, and a door painted a muted plum. A doormat embroidered with the words, "You were never not here." You laugh softly, because of course, you knock. No answer. You knock again. Still silence. And then the tiniest click. The door opens a sliver, just enough for you to glimpse a candlelit room beyond. But this isn't your return to the house. This is its way of saying, we remember you. It doesn't need you to come back, because it never let go. You walk away, heart slower now, calmer. Your mind isn't spinning. Your breath isn't heavy. You're lighter, because you've been unmasked, not in a dramatic flourish, but slowly, gently, exactly when you were ready. And you realize, not everyone is. The house doesn't trap anyone. It waits for permission. Even when that permission is whispered unconsciously between sighs. Back at your lodging, you find your suitcase packed, the ticket already purchased. Someone, maybe you, has arranged your departure. The ferry leaves at dusk. You stand at the window. Venice stretches before you, unaware, magnificent, ordinary. A city built on illusion. And still, less deceptive than you've ever been with yourself. You sip espresso. It tastes like endings. And a beginning you're not quite ready to name. The ferry waits, you board, without fanfare. No fanfares ever follow you out of places like the one you've just been. Just the quiet hush of water brushing hull, ropes loosening from moorings, the soft thud of footfall on old wood. Venice slips away. You stand on the deck, the wind tugging at your collar, salt drying on your lips. Not dramatically, not with a flourish, but like a page being turned in a book you didn't realize was yours to write in. You watch as the domes recede, the rooftops blur, and the canals dissolve into a watercolor memory. You wonder, briefly, seriously, if you imagined it all. The feather in your coat pocket says no. The tiny wax stain on your palm says no. The silence in your chest where anxiety used to live says no. You're not the same. And whatever it was, the house was, real or not, it did what it needed to do. You move below deck, not out of fear, but because the ferry hums with quiet now, and you crave closeness, shadow, rest. You sit in a narrow booth by a fogged window, order nothing, speak to no one. The ferry moves, and you realize you're still carrying something else. The note, the one you thought had vanished. It's folded inside your jacket, lining thin as breath. When you unfold it again, the words have changed. You left the house, but it didn't leave you. Soon, you will be someone else, which earns a glance from a fellow passenger, then a second glance, as if they almost recognize you. They don't. Symbolic name changes were common, especially after spiritual retreats, artistic reinventions, or public disgrace. It wasn't erasure, it was transformation. That is not a warning. That is the point. He never explained what house he meant, but the letter was found, tucked inside a box, labeled Venetian Nocturne, like a favorite coat. The fairy lanterns glow gold against the mist. A child laughs at the sound of the horn. Someone sneezes and blesses themselves. You laugh out loud. No one does, because you're halfway into someone new now. A mainstream historical fact. When Venetian nobles returned from their seasons of excess Florence, Paris, Istanbul, they often re-entered their homes under different names. A fringe tidbit. In a forgotten letter to his lover, Casanova once wrote, "I walked out of the house with my name, but left my heartbeat behind." Historians still argue whether it referred to a real place or a state of being. She's on a dock as the ferry drifts past an outlying island. She doesn't wave, doesn't smile. Back on the ferry, dusk creeps in. You feel it settle over your shoulders, not heavy, but sure. Life resumes, and yet you feel stitched differently. Not better, not healed, not perfect, just real. There's a moment, just one, where you swear you see her again, the woman in the plum dress. But it's there. The flame flickers like it's been waiting. You lie down without undressing, close your eyes, just watches. But you know it's her, not because of her face, because of the stillness, the same stillness she held in the house when mirrors cracked and laughter turned to truth. You nod, she nods, then she's gone again. You stay by the window until the sky fully darkens. When you finally go to your cabin, it's quiet. A single candle burns beside the bed. No one lit it, and the ferry becomes a cradle, rocking you gently between past and next, not future, next. Because what comes next isn't predetermined, but it is yours. And the house, it may call again, different name, different face, but the same voice, whispering, when you're ready. You wake before the sun, not abruptly, not startled. You simply surface, as if your body already knew the world was about to start again and gave you the courtesy of a soft warning. The candle has long since burned out. A curl of smoke trails from the wick like a sleeping breath. You stretch, slow and cautious, as though testing your limbs for familiarity. They still belong to you, the kind of air that hasn't passed through stone or perfume or confession, but barely. You step out of the cabin and back onto the deck. The air has changed, crisper, more open. Ahead, a new shore, not Venice, not memory, just a place. One you don't recognize, but that doesn't mean it's unfamiliar. The sun crests behind the hills as the ferry docks. You disembark with the others' fellow travelers who don't seem aware of what you carry. Or maybe they do. In that quiet way, some people understand the weight of silence. No one says anything. You step onto land, and the world doesn't shift. Stucco and shutters, olive trees leaning like gossiping elders, a cafe with one umbrella out. a bell ringing from the church tower as if announcing your arrival, though of course it's not about you, because you already did. The town here is modest. One of them is sketching a house, not a stick figure house, but your house, the Venetian one, the one that might not exist, it never was. You wander with no purpose, just following the shape of your own breath. A narrow street leads you to a courtyard where a group of children are drawing with chalk, high arched windows, a plume of smoke from an unseen chimney, a pair of masked figures in a ballroom, a mirror drawn in pale lavender chalk. You freeze. The child looks up at you and smiles. "Have you been?" she asks. Your mouth opens, closes. You nod. She shrugs and returns to her work as though the question was rhetorical, as though everyone goes eventually. You continue walking and find yourself before a bookshop. Not the one from Venice, but its cousin, somehow. You step inside. The smell of ink and sleep welcomes you. The clerk doesn't look up, like someone turned your memories into myth and bound it in leather. You browse. Let your fingers graze titles until one seems to pull at your skin. Travelers from the 1700s often kept elaborate journals, not just of events, but of dreams, hallucinations, inner thoughts. One journal from 1766 claimed to be written in a language I never knew I spoke, but always understood. The text was undecipherable, but under each entry was a single word in Latin, reverto, I return. These mirror books were considered exercises in self-truth. Many were destroyed by heirs who found them too revealing. You lift it. It has no title, of course. The barista gives you an extra spoon just in case. You stir the drink slowly, letting the sugar spiral. It tastes like memory and future braided together. But this one isn't blank. It's yours, page after page, written in your own hand. Your thoughts, your fears, your night in the house, though not as you remember it, more vivid, more poetic. A mainstream historical fact, a fringe tidbit. Historians still argue whether it was a cryptographic invention or a message to the self. You close the book, you place it on the cafe table and leave it there, and leave it on the shelf. You pass a tailor, a clockmaker, a stone fountain where ivy climbs over a lion's head, and then you pause, not out of rejection, but because it's already inside you now. You return to the cafe. Order something sweet. A couple nearby argues about the past. You hear only fragments. She never forgave you. She wasn't supposed to. It means nothing to you. Same scuff. Or maybe it means everything. You take out the feather again. Still soft. Still impossibly intact. A gift. Or maybe a seed. You don't look back. The town bends around your path like it already knows the rhythm of your steps, because you see something impossible. A single red shoe, sitting alone on a windowsill. Same make, same heel, as if it followed you here or waited. You don't take it, but you nod and walk on. By now, the line between your thoughts and the house's thoughts is thin as silk. You don't question it anymore. You simply move through towns, through people, through hours that stretch and fold like parchment in candlelight. This new place isn't Venice, but its fingerprints are everywhere. A corner of architecture, a scent of bergamot in a stranger's scarf, the faintest echo of a violin playing in a room with no windows. It doesn't haunt you, it accompanies you, like a memory that agreed to behave, provided you don't forget it exists. You step into a chapel late that afternoon, not for prayer, not even for stillness, but because something tugs you toward it. It's empty. Light slants through the stained glass, like colored smoke. A statue of a saint watches you with calm detachment. And beside the altar, a box, small, wooden, unmarked. You recognize it, but not from Venice, from before. It's the box from the night you stopped pretending. You kneel before it, unsure why you open it. Inside, a single phrase on paper. Have you forgiven yourself for the roles you played? You sit with it. Let it hang in the air like incense. Have you? You think of the versions of yourself you wore like masks, not just in the house, but long before. The people you became to be loved, admired, obeyed, feared, invisible, desired. They weren't lies, they were adaptations, but you don't need them now. You close the box, not to hide the truth, to honor it. Outside the chapel, a storm threatens. The sky bruises, wind lifting dust and old leaves into small hurricanes around the square. But you don't hurry. You walk slowly, deliberately, as the first drop hits your cheek. You let it stay. You don't flinch from rain anymore. A mainstream historical fact. In the 1700s, public baptismal fountains were sometimes placed in city centers, not for hygiene, but as invitations to renewal. To pass through the square wet was not shameful, it was symbolic. It meant you'd chosen to begin again. A fringe tidbit. There's an anonymous Venetian poem carved into a garden wall in Burano that reads, "I washed my face in moonlight and forgot my name, but remembered my voice." Historians still argue whether the wall was public art, madness, or a coded message to former initiates of the pleasure houses. You pull your coat tighter, not for warmth, but for grounding. And then, just as the rain thickens, you duck under the awning of a shop. A woman middle-aged, with silver-streaked hair and eyes, the color of duskofers. You a towel without a word. You thank her. She nods toward a table inside. A book waits there, not blank this time. Its title is familiar. The person you are becoming. You don't open it. You already are it. The shopkeeper watches you kindly. You were expected, she says, and nothing more. You leave the shop with no book, no receipt, but something has changed. You walk with less noise, less explanation, no destination, because destinations imply an end. And the house taught you that there is none, only thresholds. You wander toward the edge of town, where the buildings thin and olive groves begin. The trees are gnarled, generous, full of quiet breath. You sit beneath one, the damp grass soaking through your trousers, and you wait, not for anything specific, but with readiness. The feather is gone. The box is closed. The laughter, the mirrors, the scent of waxel of it has folded into your bloodstream. The house is quiet now, but it isn't gone. You close your eyes, feel your pulse. It's your own, and also not. Night returns gently, without prelude. The wind calms. The storm never came. The sky bruised, threatened, whispered, and then forgave. You sit beneath the olive tree for longer than you expect, until the air turns cool and the first stars glint in like shy guests at a ball. It feels like a ceremony you were never formally invited to, but you stayed anyway, and that, it turns out, was enough. You walk back through the darkening streets of the quiet town. Your steps make no sound now, not because the ground is soft, but because you are. You've been sanded down by velvet, by confession, by the house itself. You pass a window lit from within. Inside, an old man plays chess against himself. He moves both sides with equal care, and every time he captures a piece, he nods like it was necessary. Not a loss, just a truth. you keep walking. Someone hums from an open doorway. A child in a mask stumbles past you laughing, tripping on their own shoelaces. Their parent hurries behind, not scolding, just adjusting the mask so it sits properly again. The child doesn't thank them. That's not the point. At the end of the street, there's a small bridge, stone, unadorned. You step onto it and look down, not at water, at your reflection. It looks different, not older, not younger, just truer, not performing anymore, just being. You exhale, and in that breath, you realize it est the first time you Haven Tea tried to impress your own story. You cross the bridge. On the other side, there's no crowd waiting, no procession, no final key to turn. Just you're free to go wherever you want, which is exactly why you stop. Turn a dream you can't shake. A room in your own home where the light always falls strangely. Look behind you one last time. Venice is gone, but she'll return, and so will the house. Maybe not with plum curtains or candles dripping laughter or obsidian masks. Maybe next time it'll be a voice in a cafe, but it will call again, because the house doesn't exist for pleasure. It exists for remembrance, and you. In many 18th century pleasure houses, guests were encouraged after the festivities ended to write a single sentence in a private guest book, not about what they did, but about what they learned. Most wrote something silly or cryptic. One wrote simply, "You answered. You didn't flee." When asked what was inside, the keeper only replied, "Everything you needed to leave behind. You stayed. Even when it got strange, even when it cracked you open, even when it asked you to laugh at your favorite lies." A mainstream historical fact. Now, I know what I sound like when I'm honest. A fringe tidbit. One house reportedly kept a drawer of forgotten items left by guests. The drawer was never emptied. Staff claimed the items had weight, spiritual weight. Historians still argue whether that drawer ever existed, but you believe it. You believe it fully, because you left things behind too. And what you carry now, it's lighter, quieter, more you. You step off the bridge, past the gate, into whatever comes next. The house sleeps, but not for long. And when it wakes, it will remember your name, even if you don't. Let your breath ease now. Let it slow. You've crossed more than a city tonight, more than stone bridges and masked corridors. You've crossed thresholds that don't show up on maps, rooms that shift when you're not looking, mirrors that reflect not your face but your becoming, and that's enough. You were only asked to stand in it, to let the house press soft fingers against your temples and show you how many selves you've worn, how many truths you've shelved, how many masks you thought you needed, when all along your bare face was waiting quietly beneath them. So, as your body softens, now sinking into your bed, your chair, your silence, know this: you're not broken, you're not late. The house knows, and it will wait, in dreams, in glimpses, in the hush before laughter. It doesn't need you to remember how to find it, because it never truly left. Now breathe. Inhale through your nose, long and slow. Hold. Exhale softly, like a candle going out. One more time there. Let your thoughts blur. Maybe you'll hear music through the walls. Maybe you'll feel velvet under your fingertips. Or maybe you'll just rest and wake lighter. Either way, you're already home. End of script. Sweet dreams.